Hey guys, YouTuber Nerd here. Alright, now here I am continuing on with my series of Goosebumps episodes that were released on home video in the 90s. And now for my next review, this is going to be a review for The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. So this is another one that is really like one of the more well-known episodes of the show. I mean, it just is like one of those episodes that really do like come to people's minds when and Goosebumps is really mentioned. Yeah, and I remember like as a kid, this was like one of the ones that I was really like kind of like scared to watch when I was really little. Like, just this was one of the ones that I really did find like kind of scary when I was like really little. Like, I remember back like when it was first released on a home video. Like when I was like really young, like I really could never get through like watching this because I was just like found it like really like dark and scary when I was like a really little kid. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I was finally able to actually like watch this like straight through. And yeah, and when I got older, when I was like starting to watch it, like when I was able to get through it, went straight through. Yeah, I really did like it. Yeah, you may remember like back when I was like ranking my 13 favorite Goosebumps episodes all those years ago. I did like place this at number two on the list. So yeah, so I really do love this episode. It really is like one of like the best episodes of the show, and I've even heard like some people even say that this is their favorite episode of the entire show. So yeah, this episode really is like held in a high regard by fans of the show. But yeah, so this episode was based on the 14th book in the book series. So yeah, so this was like a relatively early book in the series. And yeah, and overall, yeah, like I said, I really do like this. Like, yeah, I really did like that. Like, with all like these like werewolf stories that have been told like over the years, I did like that. Like, the R.L. Stein like wanted to really like tell like sort of like a more kid-friendly version of a werewolf story, and I think it is done like pretty well. And yeah, and this the story is told like pretty well in this episode. Yeah, what I really like about this episode is that we're like kind of kept in suspense throughout like the entire episode. Like we never really do actually like see the werewolf in this episode until like the last 10 minutes or so. So yeah, so we really are like kept in suspense for like most of the episode. Like it really is like kind of like making us think like is the werewolf even around? Is there just like no werewolf at all? Like, just yeah, we really are just kept in suspense throughout like most of the episode. Yeah, and in a sense, I think that really just kind of like make it like kind of like keep it like more like suspenseful and in a way like kind of like scarier because there are like times in like horror movies and stuff where you never really do actually see the monster. You just can really like feel its presence and just know it's out there. And in a sense, that does really kind of make it scarier where you don't actually see the monster. And that really is like kind of the sense here too, where like there's like a lot of stuff going on. Like you hear the howls at night, and with all like the animal attacks and stuff, and with like a certain character that's in this episode, like like you can kind of like feel that the werewolf is around, but you don't really see it for most of the episode. So it really is kind of like questioning whether like there really is a werewolf out there. And so yeah, so I really do like the way that the story is told. Yeah, and then this episode, of course, like with all the attacks that the werewolf is responsible for, like the blame is like placed on another character or in this story. And then yeah, and what I do kind of like about this episode is that we really are like meant to really believe that like there like one character is like the werewolf, but then like towards the end of the episode we find out that there's like a little bit more of a twist in this than was originally let on. So yeah, so I really do like kind of like that. It really does take that swerve. Yeah, so I really do like this episode. I mean, the store, like the setup for this episode, is really like kind of like the setup that quite a few Goosebumps episodes really did use. It really is like about a family that has like moved into a new home, but around like in where they live, like there's like a lot of like there's like some really strange stuff going on, and really don't know what it is, and like there's one character that can really like feel like all this stuff going on, and like they really do feel that they really do know like what's responsible for it. But the rest of the family really doesn't really think that it's true, and they really don't believe him. And and he and then yeah, then at the end, like the son, like the son really is like trying to really like show that like what he is saying is true. And then yeah, then at the towards the end of the episode, then like the family really does realize that everything that the son was saying was true. And yeah, so it really does kind of like have that sort of setup to it. Yeah, so so overall, yeah, I really overall I do like the characters in this. Like the this episode does star Brendan Fletcher as like the main character Grady, and yeah, Brendan Fletcher does pretty good. Like I remember as a kid, I did like see like Brendan Fletcher in like quite a few movies and TV shows I watched growing up. Like of course, like he was Larry in Air Bud. And he even played that guy Mark in Freddy vs. Jason. So I did like see him in like a lot of stuff of like growing up, and yeah, and I think this was like one of the earliest things I did see him in, and yeah, and he does a pretty good job in this, yeah, and the other characters I think are good, like the rest of his family I think do pretty good, and just like all the supporting characters throughout this, I do think that they all do like pretty good jobs overall. Yeah, I mean, if I did have like kind of like a criticism for this episode, I would say it is probably like the design of the werewolf itself. Because yeah, like I said, for most of this episode, like we don't actually see the werewolf, but when we do finally like see it towards the end of the episode, it I felt that it really did look kind of off, and it didn't really like resemble a werewolf. Like when you see a werewolf, like well, when you think of a werewolf, like what do you really think of? You really do think of a creature that really does like have the resemblance of a wolf with like the head and everything with like the muzzle and like the ears pointing up and all that stuff and just like able to like stand on two legs and howl at the moon. And here, like, it really doesn't really look like an actual wolf. Like, the werewolf in this, it really does kind of like looks like a mix between sort of like a gorilla and a Sasquatch. I think, like, it just really doesn't look right, and it really doesn't really like resemble a werewolf. I, now there are like I know like in some other werewolf projects, like the Wolfman, for example, like and like the Wolfman movies, like he didn't like the werewolf really didn't like really seem like a true werewolf. They didn't really like look like it. But in it and like those films' defenses, like they were like from the 40s, so I don't really think that they really did have like really like the technology or like the proper makeup or stuff to really like give him like an actual werewolf look, especially seeing how it was like actually Lon Chaney Jr. wearing all that werewolf makeup. So yeah, you can make the argument that they really didn't really have like the right stuff to really like make the werewolf look like really legitimate. Yeah, but here this is like you said in like well, this was made in the 90s, and yeah, and just it doesn't even really like look like an actual werewolf. Like it really does make me think like how low that this show's budget really was, or rather, like I guess I should say limited the budget was because they really didn't have enough to really like make the werewolf look legit. So yeah, so I guess that is like one criticism that I do have with the episode is the design of the werewolf. But I mean, yeah, I still really do like this episode a lot. Like I do like the setup, and I do like just like how suspenseful it is. And like I said, like for younger like people watching it, like if you're like little kids, this may be an episode that really will like scare you. Like it is an episode that will just like really like make you like well that you'll feel kind of like scared to watch, and I can say that from experience. So yeah, so overall, like yeah, while it does kind of like have some flaws such as the design of the werewolf and stuff. Now, what is good in this episode? It's really good, and it is just like done very well, and it really does just like keep us in suspense for the entire episode. That I really do like see this episode as one of the best episodes of the entire show. So so this is kind of like what I was talking about with the Night in Terror Tower. Like, if you want to see a Goosebumps episode that really does like have like a darker tone to it and just like very suspenseful, yeah, this is definitely a good one to check out. All right, so I think I've like gone on about this stuff enough. So yeah, I guess I'll just start talking about this episode. All right. So the episode opens with an introduction from R.L. Stein, and he was talking about like just how werewolf legends did haunt people's dreams for hundreds of years, and just like have like just like was talking about like thought of just somebody under the full moon, like actually turning into a ferocious wolf creature. And yeah, and then he mentioned like how parents and grandparents really do love to be scared by like classic werewolf tales, and hopes like the viewers will enjoy the Werewolf of Fever Swamp. And then yeah, then he just said that he would be going for a quick bite, and then yeah, we would like find out what he really did mean by that at the end. Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, then when the actual episode does start, it shows how Grady and his family, which includes his sister Emily and his parents, move into a new house near this swamp that is known as Fever Swamp. And after like they found a corn snake in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom, the parents sent Grady into the swamp to set the snake free. And as Grady he did that, as he went into the swamp and set the werewolf free, like as Grady was like heading back, he ended up like getting lost in the swamp, and then like showed that there was like somebody else like that was like following Grady, and then it eventually like revealed that healed who it was as Grady was like running and bumped into the other person, which ended up being like this crazy old guy. Yeah, and then the following day, like uh, as it showed that how one of the reasons that Grady and his family moved to the swamp is because Grady's parents are scientists, and they're like studying this flock of deer that they have locked up in a pen, and they're just really trying to experiment how the deer will adapt to the swamp. And then, like your Grady's dad explained that the old guy that Grady saw in the swamp is like just a hermit that is just lost his family a while back and has just been living off the swamp, but really doesn't harm anybody. But yeah, Grady and Emily still really were not very happy about their new living situation. They really didn't want to be in the swamp, and yeah, there just really wasn't anything for them to do. And then Grady then eventually ended up meeting a neighbor kid named Will, and and then And yeah, then Will was just like saying how like people usually don't move into Fever Swamp, but they move out of Fever Swamp, and there really isn't like a lot of like other kids around. It's mainly like old people that really do live there. And then Will was also like telling Grady how the swamp is like really does kind of like mess with people's minds, and it like really does make people go in and are never actually uh, seen from again. And he was like telling Grady that the reason that his parents really did get the house so cheap was not because the house was like worn down, but it was because that the previous lady that actually lived in the house went into the swamp and never did come out. Yeah. And Will was then like just explaining to Grady the reason that the swamp is like known as Fever Swamp is because it's believed that there's a fever that does come from the swamp that causes people's bodies to heat up and just gets inside their head and just makes them go insane. And yeah, and then eventually, then like the swamp hermit then started to started to walk in their direction, and then yeah, Will and Grady just ended up like hiding after Will like told Grady to run. Then yeah, then Will was just telling Grady that like the swamp hermit is really like the main reason that a lot of people are disappearing from around the swamp, and what his dad told him about this hermit being harmless isn't true, and he was just been like roaming around the swamp for decades, and then he was just telling Grady how like I just the full moon will be out tonight, and that he'll just like see like how bad the swamp hermit is, and just saying that there's nothing that really does howl like a werewolf. So yeah, so Will was like just basically telling Grady that the swamp hermit was a werewolf. So that's another thing that really does like make this episode very suspenseful is that like like there's always like mention of the werewolf, but you don't ever see it. So well, yeah, you don't see it until like the last 10 minutes of the episode, like I said. So yeah, that's something else that really does like you keep us in suspense. That despite the fact that the werewolf is like always mentioned, like it really doesn't like it. We really don't see it until like the end of the episode. So yeah, so that's something else that I really do like is like how it's very suspenseful like that. Yeah, yeah. But then that night, then like Grady was just telling his family about everything Will told him about, like the fever that comes from the swamp and the people disappearing around there, and how like the swamp hermit is a werewolf and everything. But then yeah, then Grady's dad then just like said how like just none of that is true. Is that like there's no such thing as a werewolf, wolf, wolf, and that like the stories about werewolves are just old folk legends, and like there's been no evidence to prove it to be true. And the fever that like is believed to come from the swamp doesn't exist, and just once again he said that the hermit was just harmless and has never hurt anybody. So yeah, so if I can like just go off on a little bit of a tangent here, just Grady's parents in this episode do like kind of frustrate me, because it's not to say that they're bad characters, but just I really just it really does annoy me just like how much of know-it-alls that they are, because it's like they just are all are just like acting like they know everything, like saying that like there's no such thing and that it's harmless and all this other stuff. Like you idiots just moved into this swamp. Like you don't even know what is around this area and what it comes from it. Like seriously, just stop acting like such freaking ignorant know-it-alls. Seriously, just shut up. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, and then then and like that night when like everybody was in bed. Oh, I gotta say real quick, like this episode also like kind of like had a little bit of an interesting Easter egg. How it cuts to Grady's bedroom and says that he has and it shows that he has a skateboard, and it actually has like an emblem of the haunted mask on his skateboard. So that was kind of a cool Easter egg that they put in this episode. Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, Grady woke up in the middle of the night, like feeling like very hot, like fearing that he had caught the fever from the swamp. But yeah, when he took his temperature, he showed that he was normal. But yeah, Grady could like hear some howling coming from outside, and then he noticed that like the door was open, and yeah, and as he went to check it, then it showed like something like busting through the door, like coming at Grady. But then, yeah, then when Grady's mom and Emily then came downstairs when they heard like Grady screaming, it was shown that it was just a normal dog that wasn't actually harming Grady. Yeah, yeah, and it showed that like Grady's dad coming inside, and he was the reason that the door was open is because he went to check on the deer after like they seemed to like be upset by something. Yeah, yeah, and then like when Grady saw the dog, he just like came to the conclusion that the dog was the one that was doing the howling. And Grady asked his parents if they could keep him, and yeah, the parents were kind of reluctant to it, but then they did agree to let Grady keep the dog. Yeah, and then yeah, then the next day Grady then like decided that to name the dog Vandal. Yeah, and that also showed like Grady's mom pulling out a bringing out a telescope because she was saying how there would be a full moon that night, and there was going to be like a lunar eclipse that night. And yeah, the stuff with the lunar eclipse in this episode, it is kind of silly, but yeah, I'll talk about that later. Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, later on that day, as Grady and Will were just exploring through the swamp some more with Vandal. Eventually, they came to the bog, as it was known as, which Will said was like the heart of the swamp, and it was like this like fluid like substance that apparently was like quicksand, and if you fall into it, you really do get like sunken down into it. Yeah, yeah, and Will was like telling Grady how there was a kid who fell into it at one time, and he was sucked down like quicksand. Yeah, and yeah, and then yeah, then and when Grady was wondering how deep it is, Will then like tried to find out. He like put his arm down into the bog, but then yeah, he eventually like said that like something had actually got him. So Grady helped to pull his arm out, but it was revealed that it was just Grady's shoe that fell in when Grady like fell down the hill to the bog. Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, then later on, then Emily and the parents then like discovered that there was a dead bunny near the house, and yeah, it also they also like discovered that there were like several other attacks on animals in the area overnight. So like Grady's parents and Emily were like thinking that maybe Vandal had caused this, since like Vandal had been like outside all night, and like the bite marks on the animals came from canines. So, but Grady was like insistent that Vandal was innocent and that he didn't do any of this. Yes, but yeah, Grady's parents and Emily really did feel that because how brutal the swamp could be, like since Vandal had been there for or or all that time, that he could have become just as brutal. Like, but Grady still like just said that like Vandal had nothing to do with these attacks. So yeah, then with like Will telling Grady that the swamp hermit was the one who was like responsible for killing all those animals, then Grady went into the swamp to try to get the swamp hermit, though on how he was actually going to get the swamp hermit over to his parents to prove that like the vandal was innocent is kind of beyond me. Like yeah, Grady doesn't even say like how he was even going to be able to prove that like Vandal was innocent. Like given like how crazy the swamp hermit was, are you actually like gonna grab him and take him over to your parents? Like, yeah. So that doesn't really quite make sense. But yeah, anyway, then Grady and Will then eventually came to the swamp hermit shack in the swamp. But yeah, the swamp hermit then like just caught them and started to chase them. But then Grady eventually ended up like falling into a net trap that was set up by the hermit. Yeah, and then the hermit then took Grady back to a shack. Yeah, and then as Grady was like really trying to plead to the swamp hermit to let him go, as the moon like started to rise, like the swamp hermit then like started to kind of like observe Grady a little bit, and then he just ended up like stepping outside the shack, and then he just like started to howl at the moon, and and yeah, then Grady was eventually able to escape and run back home. And then Grady like tried to tell his mom that the swamp hermit was a werewolf, but yeah, his mom just really did find it to be a like really bunch of nonsense. But yeah, Grady really like tried to explain to his mom how just the way she and his dad like see things, how they always are based their everything around science and stuff that can be proved and explained. Like it doesn't, the world doesn't always work like that. Yeah, but then as he was like really asking like what she would do if she was in his position, then like Grady and his mom could like hear stuff coming from outside, and then yeah, then it like just like we didn't actually see what was going on, but it showed like Vandal outside barking at something, and we could like see like the deer like kind of like running around, and then when Grady and his mom got outside, and they saw that like the pen that the deer were in was broken into, and the deer had escaped, and so. Grady's mom once again thought that it was Vandal who did it, and so then as she tried to lock Vandal in the barn so he couldn't get to the deer as they retrieved them, Vandal then was like able to escape, and then yeah, Grady ended up locking his mom in the barn so the werewolf wouldn't be able to get to her. Yeah, but yeah, then Vandal then just like disappeared, and as Grady was like calling for Vandal, he could then like hear Will screaming. So then then Grady then like also like was looking for Will, and then he went to Will's house, and he just saw that like how Will's house was just a complete wreck. How just like walls were gashed and the furniture was just like torn apart and a whole bunch of stuff. So Grady came to the conclusion that the werewolf had gotten Will and his family. Yeah. And then also showed like Emily like arriving home, and when she got home, like she just like saw that nobody else was home. So then, as she was just like calling out for like the parents and Grady, Grady then eventually at Will's house ended up just like grabbing a fireplace poker and went into the swamp to look for the werewolf. Well, then eventually then like at Grady's family's home, then Emily then could like start to hear like a breathing and growling in the house, and then yeah, then we finally got the revelation of the werewolf. Like first we just like saw like some hair like behind a chair in the house, then we like saw the paws, and it showed like Emily slowly turning around, and then like we saw the werewolf's mouth, yeah, and then yeah, then Emily then like screamed and started to run away, and then like it showed like from the werewolf's point of view, the werewolf chasing Emily, and then yeah, then eventually Emily ended up like running into the barn with the mom. Yeah, and then it just like showed like the werewolf like outside of the barn, like trying to break in, just like jumping all over the place. Yeah, but eventually like the werewolf like heard like Grady calling out for like Vandal and Will, and then the werewolf went into the swamp after Grady. And then when like Grady saw the werewolf coming towards him, Grady then like started to run, and then it appeared that the werewolf then ended up getting caught in another one of the net traps, and then it showed like the hermit then like walking up from behind Grady, and then he just like the hermit then thought that he got the werewolf. So yeah, this like revealed that the hermit was not the werewolf. Yeah. Then it has like it was also like the hermit that explained like how the werewolf actually was the one that killed the hermit's family, and the hermit was like wanting revenge on the werewolf and wanted to kill it. But then as like the hermit then approached the net, it was like shown that it wasn't actually the werewolf in the net, and it was just another one of the deer. And as the hermit then was just screaming at Grady to run, then it showed then the werewolf then appearing and attacking the hermit. But we didn't actually see like anything like of the werewolf attacking the hermit. So yeah, another thing that was kind of dark, how like something that's really brutal like this, and they just like cut away from it, like none of it is shown. Like it just showed once again, like from the werewolf's point of view, like running towards the hermit, and the hermit like screaming, and then we like heard the hermit screaming like as Grady was running, but we didn't see anything. So yeah, so that really just kind of like make it like a little bit more scarier, where you don't even like actually see like what the werewolf was doing to the hermit. Yeah. Then eventually the werewolf then did approach Grady, but then that's when like the moon started to eclipsing, and yeah, this is like something that really gets kind of is like kind of silly, because yeah, the eclipse like was happening like very fast. Like that's like if you've seen this episode, like you see like how fast like the moon started doing the eclipsing. Like that's not how it works at all. Like it can take like up to an app. Well, it can take like at least an hour for a moon to do like a full eclipse. Yep. So yeah, so this is kind of silly, like how the moon just does the eclipse like so freaking fast. Yeah, but then yeah, then as with the moon no longer being full, then like the werewolf started getting weak, and then the werewolf then just collapsed to the ground and partially returned to human form. And then it was revealed that the werewolf was actually Will. Yeah, and then yeah, then Will was just like trying to like tell Grady to get away, so he wouldn't hurt Grady. And then yeah, but then eventually then the moon then like restored back to being full, and then yeah, then Will then turned back into like full werewolf form. Then yeah, then got back up, and then grabbed Grady, and then as Grady was like screaming, then Vandal then and arrived, and then yeah, Vandal then was able to like fight off the werewolf and knock the werewolf into the bog, and then yeah, yeah, then Will ended up like sinking down the bog. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, then yeah, Grady then was just like watching Will sink in, and then he just like I think Vandal for saving him, but also felt bad for Will. Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, then sometime later, like towards like the end of the summer, as a like a Grady and his family, who of course like were now like feeling better living in the swamp now that there's no werewolf or anything, and they were wrong about Vandal. So yeah, they felt more comfortable with the swamp now. Yeah, but yeah, then that night, as Grady was sleeping, and like he had this dream where like he turned into a werewolf and like just like jumped out of bed as a werewolf. But then yeah, then he just ended up like it ended up waking him up. Yeah, but then yeah, Grady then could like see that like the full moon was also out that night, and then we also like saw like Will's rotting corpse like rising up from the bog, and then yeah, then Grady just saw the full moon in the sky, and then Grady started howling at it. So yeah, so this is kind of like what. So yeah, of course, like this is what I was talking about in the plot points. Like, did what does this actually mean with Grady howling at the moon? Like, did he become a wolf now? Oh, too? Like I don't know, because like I said, like the were like Will never actually did bite Grady when he was a werewolf. Like so, or at least we didn't see it do anything, the werewolf doing anything. So yeah, so I'm really am kind of confused about like what the meaning is of Grady howling at the moon here at the end. Yeah, but then yeah, then it cut back to R.L. Stein just like saying that hopes that we weren't too scared of the story, and just assured the audience that there's no such thing as a werewolf. And then waved then he waved goodbye to the audience, and then yeah, but it showed that as he was waving, like his arm was like he had a werewolf arm now. So yeah, so like kind of just like just like teasing that he was a werewolf too. So yeah, so a nice little twist right there. Little, like kind of like showing us what he meant by a quick bite at the beginning. Yeah, and that's how the episode ended. So yeah, so overall, yeah, while this episode kind of does have its problems and some stuff that like I really don't like, such as like Grady's parents being such know-it-alls and the design of the werewolf not really looking right and all this stuff, yeah, it really is still like a very good episode. Like it's very suspenseful, it can be scary for younger people, and yeah, and just overall, I really do like the story, and I really do like how it is very suspenseful with the werewolf throughout the entire episode. Mode. So yeah, so overall, yeah, this is definitely like one of the best episodes of the entire show. Like a very intimidating monster, some intimidating characters. There's a suspenseful setup. Yeah, yeah, like I said, this really does kind of like fall into the same thing that I was saying about Night Terror Tower. Like if you want to see a Goosebumps episode with kind of a darker premise and just like keeping you in suspense for or like a pretty much the entire episode. Yeah, this is definitely a good one to check out. So yeah, so if you haven't seen this episode before, give it a watch. It is definitely like one of the best episodes of the show, and just yeah, and a very dark and suspenseful tone. So yeah, so definitely a very good episode of the show. All right. All right, so I guess this is all I can really say about it. All right, so this does it for my review of The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. So I hope you guys did enjoy this review. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.